Good morning, my name's Lish Fayer, and before we start I would like to acknowledge that today we are meeting on Ngunnawal land and pay my respects to elders past and present. As Frank just said to me, he said, Lish, I think if we ever want to break the drought we just have one of these breakfasts, because seriously, the last one as well, we were all bogged outside this morning, beautiful rain. There is no saying this rain is bad. We love this rain. But thank you all for coming out in it. It's wonderful. And if I know anything about radio talkback, Canberrans cannot drive in the rain, apparently. Now, this morning, the first thing I want to get you to do is the instruction in the actual title of this series is breakfast talk. So just eat. That's the main thing. It's the clattering of plates. Help yourself to the mini pastries and the fruit, and breakfast will come out. Please eat, because there is no breaks. The other thing I've learnt is that there are so many questions at the end. So I'm just going to get on with the housekeeping, and then we'll have the speakers and then your chance for questions. Toilets are through the foyer. So just have to go out the door here into the foyer of the hotel, and that's where you'll find that. Fabulous merch from WorkSafe ACT, not just the notepads, the pens, the hand sanitizer and the bags, but also please go over and get the posters and the communication material, the information material for your workplace. Now, over the last few years, WorkSafe has been hosting these industry breakfasts, and today it's the road transport industry. We've got freight transport and passenger transport. Can I just have a show of hands who's sort of freight transport or heavy vehicle transport? And anyone from passenger transport? Great. Anyone from sort of the depots or back end offices? Yeah. Handling? Well, it's all of that today, and our three guests will speak to that particular point. Because I think while there have been substantial reductions in the numbers and rates of injuries and fatalities especially, the road transport industry does remain one of the high-risk industries in Australia. So we're going to hear from each of our speakers. Then, after they speak, we'll put them in the hot seat and it's your chance to ask questions. There is a Slido question facility, so you'll just scan that QR code from one of the screens and ask your question. These are all anonymised, unless you want to put your name to it or your voice to it. But just put your questions in there whenever you want to, and then if there's a particular question you want to get priority, we triage them. So just give them a thumbs up if you want that question to float to the top, and then those questions will get asked first. So my next note here is just get on with it, Lish. Because get on with it. We've really got to start. So my first speaker this morning is Peggy Cheong. Actually, before I introduce Peggy, there is one important thing we have to do, because this is being filmed. And with the filming, it means that if you don't want to be filmed, please let us know, and we will ensure that you aren't part of the recording. And it also may contain graphic descriptions of injuries and other potentially upsetting or triggering content. So if you're not comfortable, attendance and participation discretion is advised. Please prioritise your mental health and seek support if necessary. Now, Peggy. Peggy this morning is our first speaker. She's the Acting Work Health and Safety Commissioner and Labour Hire Licence Commissioner. She has experience in this field and has been working with WorkSafe ACT for 4 months, but she is fully equipped to take on this role. She led Northern Territory WorkSafe for 2.5 years and lived up in the other territory for about 37. So she's come home, I'd like to say, and she brings invaluable experience to this discussion. Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you. Good morning. Lish, you haven't seen rain. This is not rain. This is a drizzle. In the Territory, we wouldn't even, we wouldn't even run across the road for this. We'll slowly walk through it. So thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to see such a great crowd, beautiful people. So before I begin, slide, I have a slide. Get rid of that picture, thank God. So just before I begin, I'd like to just acknowledge that I live and work on Ngunnawal country. The Ngunnawal people are the traditional custodians of Canberra and the region, and I proudly acknowledge their ongoing and continuing contribution and connection to the land and community. I also take the opportunity to acknowledge any other people or families with connection to the lands of the ACT and the region. So we're talking about road transport industry today. I'm very privileged to be here. This is my third breakfast now. And yes, Leisure Light, I've been here for 4 months. Thoroughly enjoy it. Love the winter. I come from Darwin. And so you've got a gorgeous territory here. So the road transport sector is, of course, one of Australia's most hazardous industries. Not hard to understand why. Whether it's long-haul truck drivers, crane operators or forklift drivers, these workers behind the wheel face daily risk and challenges, often invisible to other people in other industries, quite a unique area of work. Drivers, of course, of heavy vehicles spend their day staring at the road. My partner and I drove down from Darwin in April in an electric vehicle. There was a lot of road and a lot of sitting while I wait for trickle charging to my electric car. Yes, it was a very silly choice on my part. Thank you. So while you're driving along, what people don't appreciate is behind the wheel is what is the most important is driver safety and your right to a safe workplace. This industry, of course, is the backbone of the country's supply chains. It keeps the supermarket shelves stocked. Who can forget the rush for toilet paper during COVID? And also, of course, construction sites moving, essential services running. But it all can come at a cost, of course. The sector is burdened by high rates of work-related deaths, injuries and illnesses, long hours, fatigue, collisions, manual handling, poor vehicle economics and exposure to fumes and noise is just but a few of the hazards that people working in this industry face. While there are some operational challenges, they can still be seen as health and safety risk. The data is sobering, and I will give you some information about, I forgot to click, sorry. This clicker is not going with my notes, but we'll get there. So in 2025 alone, there's been 60 fatal crashes involving heavy vehicles, having already occurred across Australia, and we only, I suppose, in the third quarter of this year. While these are numbers, they also represent lives lost, someone who has gone to work and not been able to go home. Families are devastated, and of course communities are impacted. We do hear so much of that on the news these days. Sometimes it's very depressing to watch the news at 6, 5, 7 in the morning. Fatigue remains one of the most persistent and dangerous risks of the road transport industry. During Operation Omega 2, a national safety campaign conducted by the National Heavy Vehicle Registrar, nearly 3,000 vehicles were intercepted. Of those, 172 fatigue-related offences were recorded, including 46 critical breaches, some involving false entries in work diaries to conceal violations. These figures show that fatigue is not just a compliance issue, it can be and is often a life-threatening hazard. The National Road Worthiness Survey of 2024 also revealed some very concerning trends in vehicle safety. Non-conformity rates for B, double and road train vehicles were significantly higher in non-metro areas, with up to 19% failing inspections in their home state. Poor vehicle maintenance is another issue, and the design of these vehicles can also contribute directly to driver discomfort, injury and collision risk. Nearly 47% of Australian truck drivers are over 55 years of age, so you also have an ageing workforce to have to deal with and to address. This highlights an ageing workforce that is more vulnerable to fatigue, chronic illness and injury. We do note that the average age of truck drivers is rising globally. Here in Australia we're seeing the same trends, but of course the older workers are still out there, and they do require more consideration, if I put it that way. Canberra's growing population and our reliance on road freight mean more deliveries, tighter schedules and longer hours for these workers. That can of course come with burnout, turnover, health issues, cardiovascular disease, sleep disorders, musculoskeletal injuries and mental health decline. The road traffic transport industry employs about 200,000 truck drivers, and the broader transport and logistics sector is projected to exceed 600,000 employees by next year. So it's a very, very large part of the Australian economy. 80% of surveyed drivers say that they understand their safety responsibilities, but only 65% were aware of industry codes of practice. That sort of tends to show that there appears a lack of education or information being flowed down to people at the coalface. Fewer than half felt safety promotion efforts were being reached or achieved effectively. Alarmingly, a recent National Heavy Vehicle Registrar operation identified over 200 fatigue-related offences, including 17 critical breaches during a single holiday period, underscoring that fatigue remains a persistent and dangerous issue. I'm now in sync. Thank you, whoever helped me with that slide. We went backwards. Psychosocial hazards. I think we're all clear after all those stats that fatigue is a killer. It's a major cause of collisions, especially on regional routes connecting Canberra, Sydney and the South Coast. It's a public safety as much as a worker safety issue. And we must also recognise the psychosocial risk related to long-haul driving. Many road transport workers operate in isolation. While I think in some industries there's a two-up option, it's not always a resource favoured option. The isolation can contribute to stress, anxiety, depression, and mental health challenges in this sector are often underreported, under-recognised and under-supported. Time pressures, unpredicted schedules, and the lack of access to service make it harder for workers to seek help in this area. We know that there are many psychosocial risks associated with the industry, and some of those include work-related stressors, social and emotional challenges. There are some good news. Recent reforms are helping. There are more resources out there, but what more can we do? We have the Closing the Loopholes Act number 2. It strengthens protections for the gig economy drivers. The National Road Safety Strategy aims for zero deaths and zero serious injuries by 2050, and importantly includes road workers as a vulnerable group in work health and safety considerations. The Safer Work Zone commitment developed by Roads Australia is another step forward, and the chain of responsibility framework under the heavy vehicle national law ensures accountability across the supply chain. Having said all that, legislation alone is not enough, and the important thing is that we must engage and consult with workers because they're the ones at the coalface, and we have to really listen to their lived experiences if we're going to make a difference. We must ensure that every worker, whether they're under the Road Transport Award or working through a delivery app, know their rights and understand the work health and safety legislation. and make it clear to them that it is unlawful for any worker to be penalised for raising a genuine safety concern. No one, not just limited to road transport workers, should fear reprisal for speaking up. Always be prepared to go to your supervisor and follow the hierarchy of control. And as managers, you always have to be ready to listen and be able to take action. Clearly, I can't do two things at once in terms of moving with my slides. And Tom, you're a distraction. So, supporting PCBUs and workers. It's important that we acknowledge and understand the need to support employers, and WorkSafe is always happy to help PCBUs to be proactive, especially small businesses and small operators who may lack the resources of larger companies to implement best practice systems. Guidance, training and practical tools must be accessible and tailored to the realities of the road, and you know, understandable for everyone involved. So today, I urge all PCBUs, employers, operators and leaders to act, follow the risk management process, adopt fatigue-reducing practices, invest in health and safety, empower your workers and your people to know that their safety is more important than the outcomes or the arrival of the goods or the end of the trip. Build a culture where safety is not just a checkbox, but a core value. Because safe work is not negotiable, every worker deserves to go home safe and every day. So thank you. That's me for my 5 minutes. I think I went over 5 minutes, Frank. I meant to say on the outset, Jackie, who's the Work Health and Safety Commissioner, she's very passionate about health and safety. She believes in the effectiveness and the messages from these events and these sort of forums. She sends her apologies. She's sorry she can't be here today. Thanks, Liz. I've just buggered up the timing.
Thank you, Peggy. It's pretty alarming that half of safety promotion efforts aren't being achieved, but it is extraordinary how many, how our freight is moved around this country, and keeping the workforce safe, but also all other road users safe. It's definitely a two-way street out there on those roads. Our next guest has the perhaps unenviable position of regulating all of this. Paul Salvati is the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. He's the Chief Operations Officer. And I guess when you look at that fast and efficient and safe movement of all of this across Australia, from depot, literally depot, port, pickup, and right to the delivery, it's a really long and lonely road, as Peggy was just saying, for a lot of drivers. How do you get that message across and get everyone to adhere to all those safety regulations to keep everyone safe? Can you please give a big, warm welcome to Paul?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Oh, that's not it. Can I just check my slides? So while I'm just waiting for the slides to come up, I'll just talk. So in terms of the heavy vehicle regulator, my role there, I have all the enforcement staff in all the states under myself, as well as all the permits, the accreditation systems, a lot of the data and intel functions sit under me as well. Oh, fantastic. We'll just go back a few. Thanks. Oop. Okay, we've jumped a couple. All right. So I'll just talk a bit about, so like most of you who are employees in the room, the safety of our staff is really important to us, but obviously as a road safety regulator, the importance and safety of road users is really important to us as well. So from our perspective, we believe if we can keep drivers safe, we can keep all road users safe. That's part of our philosophy. Need to go the other way, that's the wrong way. It's still wrong way. Is there a slide before that one? It's not me. Okay. We'll just go whatever slide you want. I'll just talk to whatever slide you put up. Fantastic. Right, so our approach is that enforcement actually doesn't make a road safe by itself. Enforcement's a deterrent, right? But part of what we need to do is make sure that everyone in the industry understands how to be safe. I say to my staff, there's no sense giving someone an infringement or prosecuting someone for doing something wrong if they don't know what right looks like. So for us, we have 3 different approaches to safety in terms of industry. We've got educate, inform, enforce. Educate is one to many, where we talk broadly to industry about, hey, here's codes of practice, here's things you can do to be safer. It's for the whole of industry. Educate's more one-on-one or one to a few, whether it's a toolbox talk or a driver, to say, hey, what you've done is not safe or is not compliant. Here's what you have to do differently to be safe. That's the educate. And enforce is where we see a serious safety risk, where we see someone who, chooses not to be safe on a regular basis. We do enforcement as well. We'll go to the next slide to see what it is. Okay, Peggy touched on these before in her introduction. There's probably, in terms of driver safety, there's probably 2 risks that stand out for us: fatigue and mechanical safety. Fatigue obviously is one of the biggest killers on Australian roads. We do a lot of focus on fatigue in terms of how we can try and control the safety on roads. And I hear a lot from industry that fatigue and the regulations and the heavy vehicle national law is a really blunt instrument. It says you can drive for this long, then you have to have a break, etc., etc. It doesn't matter if you're tired or not. The challenge is with most laws, it kind of sets the floor in terms of keeping people safe. I'm really excited. There's a lot of new technologies coming out. Some of you may have them in your workplace. The fatigue detection devices in heavy vehicles now, they're awesome. The rail system, they save lives. Mechanical worries us as well in terms of road safety and driver safety and staff safety. We saw 2 weeks ago a heavy vehicle coming down, I think it was Mount Ousley, where brakes had failed. It came down just smashing through light vehicles as it careened down the mountain. No one was killed in that incident, but that's an example of where mechanical roadworthiness and mechanical safety is just as important as making sure you're alert when you're driving. Peggy also talked about if something's not right, you should tell someone. We have the heavy vehicle confidential reporting line. It's totally anonymous, and if doesn't matter if you're in industry or out of industry, if you see something's not safe, we want you to tell us. We recognise in the heavy vehicle industry, I'm not sure what proportion of the room are actually drivers. Drivers probably have the least control over the freight task than anyone. A lot of the time, a driver's forced to choose between doing what they're told to do or losing their job and putting food on the table. And that's just not right. The heavy vehicle confidential reporting line, every single phone call we take, we do an intel analysis on and actually have a look to try and see what we can do to try and make it safer for the person who's called in as well. Let's try the next one. It's kind of exciting to see what slide comes up. Okay, so it's actually really interesting. I think it's 78 to 80% of fatalities involving a heavy vehicle aren't the fault of the heavy vehicle driver. Light vehicle drivers actually are the biggest cause of deaths on our roads when there's a heavy vehicle involved. We've done a lot of campaigns to try and help this. So we did one, We All Need Space. That campaign was aimed at light vehicle drivers, bless you, to try and help them understand how to drive around trucks. Don't cut in front of trucks. The stopping distance on a truck is a lot further than you think. If you're overtaking a truck, especially in regional areas, some of those road trains are huge. It takes a lot longer than you think. Don't sit in the truck's blind spot. Don't overtake a turning truck. These are all messages as part of that campaign. The We All Need Space campaign, we won international awards for that. It got picked up internationally by other countries and run. It's been pretty successful. But then we recognised when we did it that a lot of young drivers hit the roads, and the statistics are disproportionate number of young vehicle drivers who are involved in heavy vehicle fatalities. They just don't know how to drive around trucks, because most of us who've got a bit of grey in our hair, whether it's dyed or not, are pretty much aware now. They get used to driving around trucks, and you know to give them some space, you know how to drive around them. Young people don't. So we had a whole campaign, Don't Muck with a Truck. I say muck, but it's a hash. Really aimed at young vehicle drivers. So we're going to things like Schoolies Weeks, O Weeks, just to talk to with a lot of merch. We did that campaign largely through TikTok, using influencers to try and get the message across to young drivers that driving a car is different when you're driving on heavy vehicles. And if we can get the light vehicle drivers to understand how to drive safely around trucks, it keeps the truck drivers safe as well. And the other campaigns, they're all linked to those ones. Being Dead is Boring was linked to Don't Muck with a Truck. Be Safe was more aimed at heavy vehicle drivers as well. I threw a stat out there saying 78 to 80% of fatalities are the fault of light vehicle drivers. If it's not a fatality, if it's a serious injury, it flips, and it's the fault of the heavy vehicle driver. And in a fatality, most of those fatalities occur from head-on collisions. Most of the serious injuries occur from the heavy vehicle driving at the back of a light vehicle. All right? So we do a bit of work as well, just making sure that heavy vehicle drivers understand their responsibilities for road safety as well. Okay. So Peggy mentioned one of Peggy's slides, talked about the challenges of being a heavy vehicle driver. Those challenges are only getting harder. The isolation, the long hours, the lack of ergonomics, the lack of rest areas across this country. There's so many challenges, and to be honest, they're getting worse. I was talking to Bill just before, he's been in the industry for a while, and it used to be, if you talk to drivers who've been driving for a long time, there used to be camaraderie on the road. Now it's animosity. There's a lot of new entrants coming into this industry, and that whole supporting each other culture that existed maybe 20, 30 years ago is being eroded really fast, which is a challenge, because if you're a heavy vehicle driver struggling under whether it's a mental health challenge or another challenge, usually it's the mates around you, other drivers who know what you do, you can rely on. And unfortunately, that's not quite as prevalent as it was. Thanks to the Commonwealth, and when we encounter drivers struggling, we support Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds and pass on information they have to help drivers or Lifeline. We also administer the Heavy Vehicle Safety Initiative for the Commonwealth. What that looks like is actually trying to find initiatives by industry to help industry and helping fund them. And a lot of those initiatives have been around the health and well-being of drivers, and I won't steal too much of Ben's presentation. I'm sure he'll talk on that as well, but there's a lot of really good initiatives designed to help this industry and help the drivers. Okay, that might be it. That's it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. And just a reminder, if you've got that QR code, any questions as they've come up through Paul's or Peggy's talk so far, please just write them down, get the beautiful merch, write it down and ask it. It's intriguing to me why the animosity to truckies now. I used to travel around Australia with the Questacon Science Circus, which is a big Pantech, and the delight of that job was to sit next to my truckie and drive anywhere and to pull in and to go to those rest stops and to have the truckies only breakfast like that, and it really is a support. It felt like a supportive culture then, but also I've never felt so vulnerable on the road, but also extremely just anything, up there, up high. I was invincible but vulnerable. You mentioned, Paul, and Peggy both touched on it. The long drives, the loneliness, the time to dwell, and then the mental health effects of all of that. Ben Maguire is the Director of Corporate Affairs for one of the most, I think, effective and vital mental health initiatives. It's called Healthy Heads, Trucks and Sheds. It's dedicated to supporting the mental health, well-being of this industry. Clearly, you'll see the pin. So his support and his commitment to it has been awarded. He's got the member of the Order of Australia, and he speaks to us this morning. Please give a big warm welcome to Ben Maguire.
I made the wise move of only having one slide. Could we forward to that, please? Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to start by situating you all on this continuum of mental health. Over on the far left of the screen is a green area. We're talking in that space about thriving. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning to feed the horses so that I could get here on time. It's my favourite part of the day. I'd say that I'm in the green space. My mental health right now, I'm in a dry environment, meeting new people, seeing old friends, and feeling pretty good about life. And if you had have asked me a month or two ago when we had no grass and we were calving and we were feeding cattle, I might have been a little bit more towards the yellow on some days. You know, we're not full-time farmers, but there are some days. What worried me then was I was surrounded by neighbours who were, you know, kind of fifth-generation sheep farmers who were right at the unwell stage. And I think this is a great tool for us all to really assess where we're at on a daily basis, because it can change. It changes for all of us every day, every week, every year. And based on the statistics, and Peggy's mentioned the amount of drivers on the road at the moment, today there would be 50,000 drivers of heavy vehicles on the road in Australia that would be at the right-hand end of the mental health spectrum. Now, when you think about the impact on safety, the impact on community, sustainability for the industry, that is something that we must do better about. So while we go through the presentation and the discussion today, I'd like you to think about where you're at on this scale and what are the tools or things or conversations or techniques that you apply or the people that you reach out to help bring you back into that well space. Like all of us in the room, my life has been impacted by mental health in so many different ways. My brother was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in his 20s. Now, the silver lining to that was it started to give him some tools to help manage that. I've lost a number of people very close to me who've died by suicide. And my wife and I now run a horsemanship program on our farm at Bowning called Remount. It's for veterans who experience post-traumatic stress disorder or mental ill health as a result of their service. And we get to see, you know, in the last 10 years, we've had hundreds of people that come to us, and in many ways, the solution to them being at the right-hand end of that scale is a very simple solution. We're very careful to say that our veterans and our first responders are not broken. We've just got to get the cortisol out of their system and remind them about what green feels like. And it helps them get back in the saddle and helps them find that way. One of my roles in the heavy vehicle industry was the CEO of the Australian Trucking Association. And for many years, I was very proud to, you know, advocate for that industry. And more recently, my background and passion for advocacy in mental health has aligned with the heavy vehicle industry, and I now represent Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. And our job is to ask all the questions how we can move everybody down that scale from that far right end. There's a lot of initiatives that Healthy Heads has already put in place, courtesy of the Regulator. We have had some funding from them. Outside of that, this is an organisation that is really completely industry funded. We've got trucks on the road doing mental health checks, wellness checks. We have nurses in the truck that are doing blood pressure, BMI checks, sugar levels. There's strong links to nutrition and mental health. Exercise. We've heard the stats about the ageing workforce. We've got to get people out of their trucks. We've heard the stories that there's less connection on the road. It's funny, you know, the further out in the bush you go, the better the connections are, but when you start to drive these heavy vehicles in and around capital cities, metropolitan areas, the stress levels are off the charts, and that's really contributing to this situation. If you go onto the website and look at the Healthy Heads website, there's an enormous amount of resources and tools that you can access. It was important when the organisation started 5 years ago that those tools were all made available. If you're a one-truck operator or small, medium business or even the larger corporations, these tools are free. They give you toolbox talks to help manage mental health in your organisation, how to have conversations, how to build mental health first aid champions. There's an app that you can download so that when people are on the road, they do have access to 24-hour lifeline counselling services. We partner with TACS, who offer any driver that calls them gets access to 6 counselling sessions. And we're here to remind everybody, the community particularly, but the regulators, the policymakers, there are so many things that we can do to acknowledge our drivers who keep our country moving why they matter, why their mental health matters, and how valuable they are to the community. So I really appreciate the invitation from Jackie to attend. Peggy, pass on my thank you for that, and I look forward to sharing more of that background in the panel session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Now, time for just a quick break, and then we'll come to the panel session. We would love your feedback. This is the Slido, which is for your questions, but we're just running a poll as to what sort of materials would be really useful for you where you work, what messages need to be heard. So if you could just fill that out for us while we're on a 5-minute break, just fill up your coffee again, go to the loo, do what you need to do, and then we'll come back and get started on the panel. We might kick it off. We'll start with this one. Is there space for having influencers? I think, Ben, you mentioned, and Paul, you both mentioned that the campaigns that you run to get change is really important. So is there space for having influencers doing a day in a truck for awareness, for young people, for drivers, maybe to recruit as well as to be safer on the roads around trucks?
There's a young lady called CJ. Kasharina's her first name. She drives road trains and spends a lot of her time in outback and regional Australia, but CJ spent all week at the truck show in Brisbane recently. She's got an enormous social media following, quite an incredible young Australian. If you want to hear her story, she features in one of the Healthy Heads podcasts that's interviewed by Shane Jacobson. He's an ambassador now. He's a little different demographic to the question, but people like CJ are so important. We had Divals deliver 140 tonnes of crusher dust yesterday, and all the drivers were young women in their early 20s, and the most outstanding professionals that you'd ever want to welcome onto your farm. And I just think that we need to share those stories more and more, but so it's a long way of answering questions. I think more influencers are required, and there are some amazing role models out there today.
Paul, how do you drive that change too?
Well, I agree there is space, and it's happening at the moment. So some of our campaigns, Don't Muck With the Truck, we did put influencers in the truck. We get young people from some of our campaigns, put them in trucks to showcase that. So we're already doing it at the moment, but I guess the thrust of their question is, can we do more? Absolutely, we can do more.
Does there need to be anything in when young people get a licence? Because I've got an L-plater now, and tell you what.
Yeah, I saw that's one of the questions as well. So we've been working with the jurisdictions, because at the moment, most of the jurisdictions don't have questions in the learner's permit or the licence around driving around trucks. So we've actually been working with the jurisdictions to try and put some of those questions into the licensing regime, along with videos, etc., to try and make it more interactive.
What do the panel see as the resistance or roadblocks to using AI safety in the industry, considering transport is often represented as one of the top 3 for fatalities? Can we use that anymore?
I'd say the biggest roadblock is just its newness. Its take-up rate is phenomenal at the moment. It's accelerating across all businesses around the world. I think we find in a couple of years it'll be part of that process across this industry as well.
Is this for both measuring compliance but also safety technology within the vehicle?
Yeah, it is. At the moment, you can take a video of a truck for its load restraint. I've seen this as a test case for AI, and the AI will actually look at the tie downs and what you've used to restrain the load and actually compare it to an online database to say whether it's enough or not. So you can actually look at the load restraint and say, no, AI will sell that's enough or that's not enough. So there's tools out there. They're all in the early stages, but some of you may be using them. I think you'll find more and more it'll just come into industry.
Yeah.
I've heard of one where that they have them in the heavy vehicles, and they actually recognise when the driver is starting to fatigue. Yeah. I don't think they buzz them or go zzz them, but they do. They do. Yeah. Someone's nodding that they get buzzed. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, shake the seat. Okay, not buzz. They just shake the seat. I was just thoughts came into can't unthink pictures.
And I think that
that's very effective in terms of makes them take. It just depends how tired they are. So certainly, I agree that there is a big role for AI, and it's just need to target and focus the hazard.
I wonder in terms of feeling watched, feeling seen, but also supported. Ben, you mentioned having a nurse sometimes in some of the trucks to measure blood pressure and stresses. But is the industry open to being monitored?
Well, it's a very fine line between Big Brother and support. So if you're doing 102 k's an hour, you get a phone call from the control centre. What are you doing? But if a seeing machine's alert comes on and you're a bit tired, you get someone ring you up and say, "Oh, are you okay?" So this is a classic change management dilemma. How do we encourage? I've met drivers who said that the seeing machines technology has saved their lives, and they wouldn't drive heavy vehicles without it. But they were probably the sort of people who said, "I don't want that in my truck." It probably took them a while to get to that stage. So this is going to take time. It's about encouraging younger people into the industry who would just say, "Yeah, look, no problem. I'm happy to take that on." But with the average age of our drivers, and we're going to find resistance to that change.
What practical tools and training does WorkSafe ACT suggest to help PCBUs make safety guidance easier to access, especially for diverse or low English workers, that communication issue?
So on the WorkSafe ACT website, there are many guidance, and some are translated into different languages. And our website, our very effective and efficient communications engagement team, led by Frank, has incorporated Google Translate onto our website. So if you go to our website, you can choose the language, and the core or the main part of that will come up in the language you choose. Not everything will come up, but the main information bit. I did test it. No, I didn't look at Chinese because I can't read Mandarin. I tried French and I could recognise at least 10 words. But there are other people who have tried it and it does work. And it's the basic information, but it means that you can have access to that basic information, and we'll keep working in that space.
Because with such a diverse workforce, that is so important to get the message across on site. We'll move on because there's so many coming through. What do you see as some of the gaps in that area for business industry, and what resources would be useful in the area of general safety? Do you think is that
there's nowhere to pull over and have a decent rest. So the road designers and managers and accountants and planners design a piece of bitumen, and they factor in left and right hand fog lines and road markers, and then the rest areas for heavy vehicles are an afterthought. And because they're an afterthought, in most cases they're third world, and so when people pull over as a last resort, there's nowhere to go to the toilet, then it creates community resentment. We have to find a way to look after our industry members way better and give them nice, clean ablution blocks. If we're going to attract more women to the industry, if we're going to look after people's mental health, they need a good rest, they deserve a good rest, and they deserve decent, nutritious food when they're pulled over to have a rest.
Anyone notice anything else?
I support Ben. I think another gap I'm seeing coming up is around licensing and training for heavy vehicle drivers. We're seeing a lot of drivers now in the country who, to be honest, aren't safe behind the wheels of the trucks they've got licenses for. The driver shortage is driving a lot of companies who used to invest a lot in training of their drivers to skip that now. So what that's doing is putting additional risk on the road and putting a lot of drivers in harm's way.
Can I just add to that, Liz? I agree in terms of there's not enough decent and user-friendly rest stops. Certainly in the NT, the constant concern we hear is the quality of the roads that they have to drive on. Canberra's not particularly remote, but the NT is very remote. There are certain portions of of certain highways that are just dangerous to drive on for heavy vehicles. So that's another issue in terms of infrastructure.
if anyone in the industry wants to add their thoughts of what is needed, what's the big blockage, chuck it in Slido as well. We'd love to hear your experience on the ground. Digital tachographs are used in Europe, but Australia still uses work diaries. Why doesn't Australia use digital too?
Yeah.
Can you just explain tachographs for me? I'm assuming it's A to B.
It's a measurement tool. So think about a written work diary. You write down your driving hours. The digital ones in Europe do it automatically for you, right? So that's the big difference, and there's more to it than that. But I guess I'd say, to answer the question, our industry across Australia is so broad. There's no barriers at all to enter the industry. You just need a heavy vehicle licence and either buy a truck or lease a truck and you're in. So in terms of the investment in digital tools or the awareness of them is really low across a lot of industry. We are moving in that direction. So we've had electronic work diaries for a few years now. They haven't really had the take-up we'd like them to have. There's been challenges with them. But I think what we'll see in the next decade, we'll actually see electronic work diaries or automatic work diaries actually come into the country as well. There's a question about deadlines for those. There's no deadline at the moment. I do know the policymakers from the jurisdictions are having discussions around should they start mandating electronic work diaries with a phase-in period. I don't think they've reached that decision yet.
As the regulator, the CEO of the regulator, would you like to see that change, like that anyone can get a licence, anyone can get a heavy vehicle licence and a truck and be on the roads? What would you change to that? Because clearly we need the...
This might be unpopular. Well, I'd like to see operator licensing. I'd like to see, like, if you've got for a lot of businesses that are regulated, you have to have a license to operate in that business, not drive, but to operate the business. We don't have that. So if you think about all the different people who run heavy vehicle businesses in this country, we see about 20% of them. About 20% we see in any 1 year. That's not enough, right? We're a road safety regulator. We don't see or get a chance to influence 80% of people in our industry who are actually putting drivers on the road or carrying loads. I'd like to see that we have a minimum threshold to start a heavy vehicle business around safety.
Is there a benefit to running joint training and education campaigns with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator to support industry awareness? I think.
The transport industry is probably the most broad and diverse stakeholder group of any industry I've ever seen. Everyone has an association and an agenda and an industry, and so it's probably the reason why there is a very low support at a federal and a state level to make significant change, because it plays into the politicians' hands. There's so many voices, and it would be amazing if there was one voice. However that looked, I don't know, and it's a very simple answer to saying yes, if there were combined programs, if everybody came together on one initiative, it would be very powerful.
I'll just add on this one. If anyone in the room wants to work with the regulator on education or safety campaigns, just reach out to us, please. We do a lot of work with the companies on this. We do a lot of work with general entertainment, I'd say. We were on Dippers Big Rigs, Outback Truckers, a couple of shows which showcase heavy vehicles. We've interacted with those and worked with those companies and those productions to try and get safety messages out. We also go to toolbox talks all the time. If you think you have a need in your organisation or you know of a need, please reach out to us.
I mean, I'd like a bit of training in how they back those Pantecs into the tightest little cube behind Woolies. Extraordinary skills. And as you say, like so many in the ageing workforce, great to see young people come in. What do we do to address that? Like, is there something in between to get young people into the industry? What's blocking it?
Well, you go, Ben.
Professionalising the industry and setting the expectations or meeting the expectations of the next generation. If people don't see CJ and see what can be done, or the young ladies who work for divers, and there's thousands of stories, right? There are lots and lots of them. But if all they see is the headline or the $40,000 prime mover that's not safe and it's crashing, or all they hear about is enforcement legislation and fatigue management, and that's the only thing they see, it'll be difficult to attract people to the industry. if, professional career paths, training, the license, if we actually make licensing kind of more stringent for people, not operator licensing, but driver licensing and training, and show career paths, I think that will be a big help.
What training is available for organisations in the ACT around this, Peggy, or anyone?
I'm going to defer to Paul on that one in terms of what training generally is. Is there sort of a more national type training?
Are we talking safety as well as?
I'm just wondering in terms, is it training for heavy vehicle drivers?
Yeah,
or is
anyone
it,
wants to add that in? Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah, fire away.
I mean, there are companies that do the heavy vehicle licensing like ourselves, where we also offer.
Oh, sorry, here. Leaping over there, we are at WorkSafe.
Thank you.
So we're a local heavy vehicle licensing company here in Canberra, but we have worked with Scott Knowles, who's the ACT New South Wales stakeholder for NHVR, and come down and done toolbox talks. The thing that we're seeing the lack of education around is the compliance, and take the conversation away from the freight industry. Look at the local drivers, look at the building, construction, civil drivers. That's where we're seeing the biggest gap and the biggest lack of knowledge. So that's, I guess, there hasn't been anything really from either NHVR or from WorkSafe in regards to what the chain of responsibility looks like, what the fatigue hours looks like, that sort of thing, and that's where we're seeing quite a big gap.
Okay. I'll respond to some of that. So, and it's a really good point, because companies who don't think of themselves as in the heavy vehicle industry don't reach out for that education. So we see the same with a lot of farmers who once a year they pull their trucks out of the shed, get them up to speed, transport, and they don't think of themselves in the industry. So they don't look for the education. They're not aware of what to do to be safe. So, and a lot of the education we do through our different channels just doesn't reach them because they're not engaged with industry. They're not engaged in the media we're using. So there's absolute benefit in doing that. We have materials there. To be honest, it's something we struggle with, to try and reach those organisations, those industries who don't think of themselves in the industry, and therefore for us to be able to educate them, it's a real challenge. If anyone has any ideas, come see me after this.
I reckon you guys have probably got ideas. And you mentioned farmers and that the culture around, she'll be right, tough as old boots, just get on with it.
Yeah.
I've had friends drive a truckload of cattle over the mountains and in the dodgiest looking truck you've ever seen, and it's terrifying, and I'm amazed when they arrive every time. But try and tell them shortest distance, shortest time, got to get those cows over to greener pastures. Could the panel discuss the joint responsibilities under the National Heavy Vehicle Law and the WHS Act for fatigue management?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just thinking.
Yeah, discuss.
Obviously, fatigue is a hazard, like any hazard in the work health and safety space. It's the duty of the PCBU to risk assess and manage that, depending on the nature of the work, what you have to do, and then you have to look at controls to deal with that fatigue. Is it, the isolation, the boredom? Is there something else in terms of ergonomics? And find ways to alleviate, to eliminate or minimise fatigue. There are many, I think, around Australia in the various jurisdictions, many fatigue guidance codes that are available. They're a good source, and they do provide quite a number of control measures that may be suitable. Of course, it's not one size fits all. It never is. And so you've got to find, or for any particular employer, the one that fits them and their workers.
Because fatigue, the knock-on effect for mental health, for physical health.
Correct.
And it builds. Ben, have you...
We're really looking hard at the impact of the new OH&S obligations for psychosocial support in the workplace. and just wondering what impact, and it's going to be a real minefield for people to navigate. If whether you're a small business or a large corporation, being responsible for somebody's psychosocial well-being as a director and having a legal obligation really leaves everybody quite exposed and worried about what that's going to mean. The good news is that there is now a focus on that, and yes, it is linked to fatigue and it is linked to safety. How it's going to be audited, checked, and the undertakings enforced are yet to really be seen, but certainly it's encouraging.
Do you think language barrier is a key problem? Does having minimum English language competency for commercial driving help, or is there ways around it with translation devices?
I'll start maybe. So, yes, it's an issue. And it's not just a language barrier, there's cultural barriers as well, right? So in terms of individualistic versus collective view on society, so, is it about me or is it about keeping others safe as well? But language is an issue in terms of trying to educate drivers, whether it's training, whether it's about how to comply with the law or fatigue requirements. It definitely is a challenge. We do a lot of our work online, and like most companies do, in multiple languages as well. We started looking at how we can start employing more staff who have second languages as well, in recognition of the challenges we're starting to see emerging with a greater proportion of the drivers in industry coming from non-English speaking backgrounds.
You want to add anything? Yeah.
I agree with Paul.
Yeah. Thanks, Peggy. When receiving reports from workers, what mechanisms does WorkSafe have, and NHVL, to ensure worker concerns have been raised internally with the business?
It depends on what is being reported. If it's a psychosocial hazard of picking up on Ben, then we always encourage the worker to raise it, or we ask them, have you raised it with your employer? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no, I can't because, and we take that into consideration when we look into the concern that's raised with us. It depends, but we always do encourage them to raise it with the employer, because really if the employer doesn't know, they arguably can't do anything about it, and unfortunately we don't read minds yet.
With job, as one of you mentioned, the job insecurity is huge for a lot of people. They mightn't raise it. Paul, what do you see?
So yeah, we do see that. I think from our perspective, it's really important that we act on information we get from industry through that, because the best time to stop someone from road trauma is to stop the truck from leaving the depot. So whenever we get information, depending on the severity of information we get, we go and actually interact with the operator. So it might be an education visit or a friendly visit saying, hey, talk to me about how you're managing your worker safety in this area. Sometimes, of course, we've got reports from their workers. If it's more serious, then we do an investigation and go, look, and it's a much more intensive look at their safety. But again, from our perspective, the proactive is the best way to manage safety. You don't want to wait until there's a life lost and prosecute someone. It's too late, right? It's that person's life has been lost. For us, it's all about use those little bits of information from industry to try and make industry safer.
Okay, acronym, EWDS.
Electronic work
Okay, electronic diary. Work diary, thank you. Thank you. Will mandating those assist to improve fatigue compliance in the heavy vehicle industry? And is it on the cards? I think you've looked at this a bit, Paul.
I touched on the cards part. Will it improve fatigue compliance? The answer is yes, from the compliance perspective. If you're saying, will it make industry safer from a fatigue perspective, I'd say the improvement is marginal, right? Because to be honest, you can start work at the start of your shift and be dead tired because your baby's been awake, or you've been sick, or your aged parents are giving you challenges. So you can start a shift and be fully compliant with fatigue regulation, but be tired to the bone. And things like Peggy mentioned, the fatigue detection devices in trucks, and Ben said they do save lives, right? So I'll say that EWDs will definitely improve compliance. They'll have a marginal impact on safety, But that's why it's so important that employers manage fitness for work for their staff. You got to know your staff and have your staff able to speak up and say, "I'm too tired to drive," without retribution.
Thank you. I mean, if anyone wants to write a whole question just in acronyms, that'd be great. Are there any great initiatives that the panel has seen, that you guys have seen, that make a real difference to mental health and psychosocial risk?
Well, thanks, Lish. I'm going to put in a plug here for Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. Yeah,
I think it's
it's 5 years old. I would say it's probably at the stage of maturity now where it's the story and what it delivers is now starting to be understood by industry. Instead of people saying, "Who are you? What do you do?" people are coming up to us, seeking us out. The podcast How You're Travelling has broken a lot of records because it's not people like me, it's people like CJ or Heather Jones or other people on the road who've got lived experience sharing their story that drivers can access 24 hours a day and listen to those. And the messages that we're getting back on those stories and that Shane is getting back on those stories is making a huge difference. We've got a roadshow vehicle. Our ambition is to have 4 on the East Coast and 1 in the West. At the moment, that vehicle connects with about 40,000 people a year. It does mental health checks. It does physiology checks. It provides training and toolbox talks to organisations and people about how to just be more comfortable. You don't need to be a trained counsellor to have a conversation around mental health. Just demystifying that in itself is having a huge difference. We're also getting funding for research and linking some of the other drivers around mental health, like nutrition. So if you do want to access more resources, please go online and find that. But I would say at the moment, Healthy Heads is still in its infancy, but it is starting to make a difference in the industry.
Have you seen anything? You mentioned that animosity that normally on the roads in the past that you would have had that sort of connection with other drivers out there on the road, but there's this growing animosity. Is there anything to overcome that's changed?
It's a really challenging question. The animosity is coming because what we're seeing, partly due to driver shortages, we're seeing a lot of companies spring up overnight who are cutting margins to the bone through not paying their workers properly, have them all as individual contractors, not doing proper safety checks, etc. And that's putting so much pressure across the industry. And there's a face to these new entrants, which is different to the face of traditional truck drivers, right? So there's so much of this animosity is actually being driven by, I guess I'd say, this new commercial reality for the industry. So it's really hard to address that as a regulator, because to be honest, it's around making sure the staff are paid correctly, trying to get across new entrants to industry to make sure they understand how to be safe, which is part of this.
And is the animosity within the industry?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I'm not sure, there's drivers in the room, if some of you, there's some of the social media channels, you'll see the animosity is just feral between drivers from different backgrounds or different industries. And it's getting, I see you nodding, I think it's getting worse, to be honest, far worse. And I fear the day when it transforms into actual physical violence and someone gets badly hurt.
Does Healthy Heads address any of that? Because meeting those people that don't hear that message, Ben.
Yeah, kindness is a very basic human need, and if all you're doing is being away from your family and your home for 6 days a week and you're not getting paid and there's nowhere to stop and have a shower and nowhere to stop and have a feed, it's pretty hard to be kind to other people, let alone yourself. So, Healthy Heads is not just about improving sustainability for an industry and improving mental health for an industry. It's a reminder to us all that, I think this is a post-COVID trait as well. I think there's a level of stress and breakdowns of communication generally. But as a community, everyone just needs to show a bit more kindness.
Great message. Ood is awesome. Seeing I saved my life. I'd love to know who that was and if you're happy to share, because that's a. Would you be up for just a quick share?
Thank you. So my name's Anthony. I'll give us a little bit of a plug as well. So Beck's Transport Training and myself, Beck's Bulk Haulage. We're a locally owned company, and we work with the regulator quite a fair bit in the space of fatigue management and in regards to the CI machines as well. So I can talk on behalf of Hub Fleet. Hub Fleet, EWD operator. They've got a fantastic program in the space of, they've got a great app that we use, and it does save a hell of a lot of thinking, hell of a lot of time, a hell of a lot of productivity, where the app will actually tell the driver they've got an hour before they need to have a break. They've got 15 minutes before they need to have a break. It tells the driver how long they need to have a break for. It tells the driver where they are, and it tells the driver where the closest truck stop is, if any. So Hub Fleet is absolutely brilliant. They are online 24/7, and the call centre are actually industry knowledged. So the call centre isn't just overseas, they are local, and they have a vast range of knowledge. And if they don't have the answer, they can seek the answer within immediate. It's just absolutely brilliant. So that's why I use Hub Fleet. Going back to the old school of the work diary, I found that very, as Paul can probably also back me on this, there are some challenges in the work diary, especially if you're BFM or AFM. Coach drivers, so bus drivers, Transport Canberra over here, they can also back me on this with a coach driving point of view. There's different hours for a bus driver to a coach driver, and it can get quite difficult, can't it? If you don't understand a book and how to read a book, like half our industry, it's very hard. So the EWD is awesome. So that's really good. From a CI perspective, look, my wife was a stay-at-home mum for 10 years. I was in the civil construction space for 12 years and went on the highway for about 15 months or so with Ron Finnemore Transport. When they first started trialling the CI machines, I was on a rotational 7-day shift, carting fuel. At one stage, it was 50,000 litres of fuel going from Sydney to Canberra. Very short stint. However, 3 o'clock in the morning, I pulled over just to have a rest. And in that space, I got back in the truck at 3:30 in the morning. And funnily enough, woke up on the other side of Marul and Weybridge. Why did I wake up? Because my seat started vibrating. So that was a level 1. So God knows how long I was asleep for, but yeah, it saved my life. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, pretty powerful. Saved your life, probably saved other people, yeah, and all your family, everything, the knock-on effect of that. Thanks for sharing. Are regulators examining cause during incident investigation and inspection, or while assessing PCB use with compliance in the workplace? Does anyone want to take that one on?
Yeah, so from our perspective, chain of responsibility, every single time there's an incident investigation, I'm thinking fatalities or serious injury, it's automatic that we start looking at chain of responsibility. It's automatic we start looking at the employer. How are they keeping the drivers safe? Was there a contribution towards that accident or not? So it doesn't mean there always is. Sometimes it is just an accident, or or the driver has done something silly. But every single time we see a fatality, we automatically have a look at the broader environment in which that fatality occurred.
Similarly to WorkSafe ACT, obviously, if there has been incident, then we do look at all of the PCBUs who might be involved, up the line, down the line, in the middle, and how they may have not contributed, but what role they may have played in terms of their requirements in the delivery of the services.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, so if people want to add the questions, keep voting. I think we did address this one, unless anyone wants to add anything about the training for light vehicles. No? The gig economy is a big part of the passenger transport. Does WorkSafe know gig workers work 12 or more hours a day, mostly with pressure to rush? And if you do, has WorkSafe done anything about this?
I'm not particularly aware of the working 12 plus hours per day bill. It hasn't, I think, been reported to us as a concern, but if it was, then we would certainly have a look at it.
Who would report it? It would
probably the person required to work 12 hours or more a day.
would they want? They mightn't want that
reporting confidentially?
but they might
Anonymously?
might want those 12 hours a day. I think that's the friction.
Yeah, that's it, because they're choosing to do it. It's really hard to identify. So for us, we anecdotally hear a lot about people driving Ubers during the day, trucks at night, or they drive trucks one shift with one company A, then go with a different work diary for company B. And there was a question before about the European model of actually tracking fatigue. You have a card you sign in with in some countries. Doesn't matter who you work for, what you do. If you're a professional driver, light vehicles, heavy passenger vehicles, heavy vehicles, that card shows what you've been doing that day. It's really hard to identify, to be honest. We've had a couple of tries at trying to find these gig economy workers who are doing multiple shifts in a day. They don't report it themselves because they want to make the money. That's why they're doing it. It's a challenge. It's an increasing challenge. And it's one as a regulator, we're struggling with the current tools and legislation we have to identify and address.
If anyone has any solutions, put them on the Slido. What, if any, road safety policies or processes do businesses and industry have in place if you go into any of these workplaces?
I'll give Ben's previous employer a plug. So the WorkSafe regime, I thought, was a pretty good regime as a whole. Actually, I might just let Ben talk about it.
Ben, you're drunk.
Well, it was so good the regulator took it on. But that's another time and place. It was, look, it's a sort of industry-led, self-audited. It's audited by independent operators, but it's to be a WorkSafe member, you have to meet a extra level of sort of guidelines and practices for your business, and there are people who can leverage that well to win new business out of being WorkSafe accredited. It's probably not leveraged enough in the workplace, but certainly WorkSafe would be a standout model. It's now moved over to New Zealand as well. They're using it over there also, yep.
How can we balance the interaction between speed, fatigue and role overload? Risk controls on each will inversely affect the other two. It's a good question. A lot of tight deadlines, getting there on time, getting there safely.
It's an excellent question, and I think in that space, as employers, you need to listen to your drivers, you need to listen to your workers about what is going to be the most hazardous risk for them. This is where a part of, I think we were talking about psychosocial safety previously for truck drivers. I think the important thing here is, your workplace have to have a culture where your workers are comfortable to speak up and say, look, I can't drive that fast, or I can't drive that long because I'm older, or I've got a cold, or whatever. But they need to know that they can tell the employers that without reprisals. And that comes with a culture within your organisation that would allow that to happen without fear of anything bad happening. Is difficult to do. It's difficult to instill, but it's very important.
And maybe in a big organisation, but in smaller businesses, is that possible? Do you think if someone says we've got to get a load up to Queensland, someone calls in sick and there's no other drivers?
I think it's possible. It maybe you have to rearrange or have some contingency plans, but there's nothing, no load arrival deadlines is worth the life or safety of your workers.
Part of the reason that Paul Graham initiated Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, he was an executive with Woolworths at the time. He's now the MD of Australia Post. He was very aware that a driver would pull into a distribution centre and get woken up every 20 minutes to move along so that they can stay in the queue. So this is a whole supply chain issue. If we're going to manage and expect drivers to manage their fatigue, we can't keep banging on the side of their truck to get them to move along every 20 minutes for the next 6 hours so they can stay in the queue. So when we talk about chain of responsibility, that's a great example of where the big DCs really need to take better care. I mean, I've been into DCs where there's yellow squares on the ground where drivers are to stand while their truck is being loaded. That is supposedly where they get their rest break. That's not good enough. Now, things are changing, but not fast enough.
Yeah, they almost need a valet service. I reckon there's ideas that nothing's changed in that, Ben. That seems, yeah.
And Lish, I noticed earlier on there was a question about big supermarkets like Coles and Woolies. I mean, what can they do to contribute to the safety of drivers in road traffic? Because they're the recipient, they benefit from that. I suspect, again, it's a matter of them requiring their providers to be more active, or, you know, when they are engaging somebody, to make sure that they have the right culture, they have the right measures to make sure that people are safe. I mean, that they have the buying power.
Yeah. I think that we might have to wrap up questions there. WorkSafe ACT do have a fantastic comms team and experts on this, so any questions there will be posted, I think, on WorkSafe. Is that right, Alice? Yeah. We'll send them, yeah, WorkSafe will send them out. Before we wrap up, I'd just love each of your thoughts, just if you want people to go away with one thing that needs to be addressed, changed, or applauded, what would you say?
Well, I've been banging on about culture, and I think one takeaway I'd like is value your employees, empower them, make sure that they understand that their lives and their safety is more important than getting a load to go there, to get to a destination. And if you have that sort of culture, your people can stay safe. And also, they would appreciate the workplace they've got. And I think that, all in all, will then increase the business profile, productivity, all of that. Your people are your most important asset.
For me, I'll just borrow something that Peggy said before. No load is worth a life. I guess it's a pretty simple message. Don't put your staff or put yourself in harm's way for the sake of freight.
And my message would be the mental health continuum that I put up at the start of the presentation. We can all impact each other and ourselves on improving where we are on that continuum by what we say, what we do, how we act, how we care. And it's actually an obligation on all of us to make sure that we do improve that across the community, not just the industry. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming out this morning. Still beautifully wet outside. Take care on the roads. But we really appreciate your support. This is a fabulous full room. Thanks to Andrew Braddock, spokesperson for Transport, for coming out. And I know lots of other you in government and industry and actually on the ground really appreciate it. But most of all, Peggy Cheong, Paul Salvati and Ben Maguire, AM. Thank you. Take your merch. Thank the wonderful WorkSafe ACT staff on your way out for putting these great events on, and we'll be back with more.